Thank you all for joining yet another one of our mini sessions. Today's mini session will be talking about cost share. So just in general, any sort of effort-related cost share, salary cost share, and then quote unquote cost share related to salary cap. And sort of like we've mentioned in some of the other presentations, salary cap is not truly an allowable source of cost share, but it is, the university or other sources bearing the cost of a project that is not being directly charged. So we are, when we do report salary cap cost share over the cap, that is going into that cost shared bucket in ECC. So I will get started if my slides will advance. There we go. So today's agenda, again, this is just a short, brief overview. This is not intended to cover all things cost share or salary cap, but just a few reminders, some things we thought would be helpful to cover in 30 minutes, especially since you all are doing this once a year, although it may seem like more often than that. So I'll go over the cost share entry methods for project statements and effort statements, as well as some helpful tips for both types of entries, and also how to remove cost share on the effort statements, as that can be a little bit tricky. So cost share and salary cap entries. You will have to enter if you do have cost share or you do have salary cap or over the cap to report. You will have to do, the process is different for effort statements and project statements. So effort statements, cost share is entered directly onto the statement and it's reflected in real time. You can edit, remove, you can do that and see the changes directly in ECC on the effort statements. For project statements, there is a link that is within the ECC, and I'll have screenshots of all that, that you will have to put the entries in. That will be fed into ECC in 1 to 2 business days, depending on when the entry is made, and then you will see it reflected on the statement. So it is not immediate, and you have to go to a separate link and web page to enter that in. So I'll go over project statement entries first. So project statements, you're going to go to the links tab in ECC. You're going to click on the project statement cost share subtab. And then that will take you to a separate page, which will, initially it's going to show up something like this down in the lower left-hand corner, cost share project statements. You're going to click there. And then you'll have a page that populates that says project statements, cost share, academic year, and employee. So academic year is currently defaulting to 2024. We are talking with our team, our technical team right now to see if someone has to make changes to a 2023 statement. Right now we don't have that option, but we are thinking that it's probably just going to be a drop down and that you'll be able to select which academic year. But right now, everything is defaulting to 2024. Then you will enter in either employee name or UIN, either or, to pull up who you would like to add cost share for. So something I didn't mention on the slides is, since you are doing this for project statements, this is only for folks that are on a project statement. So if the individual is a faculty and they are on an effort statement, you are not going to find them in here. So just keep that in mind. I know, like when we first implemented this last year, there were some questions about, I can't find this person. Turns out the person was a faculty member, so therefore they're not going to be in this population. So that might be something that you run into. But once you find the person that you're looking for, that you want to add cost share on their statement for, you're going to click the add button. And then on the right-hand side of the slide, this is another screen that will populate, and you'll have to enter more information. You're gonna already have the employee's name populated, The sponsored fund with cost share, that's going to be a drop down based on what funds that individual is being paid from. So what sponsored funds. So, or that they're associated with if we have a $0 entry, like if they're a PI or a COI. Any fund that they are associated with should show up in that drop down so that you can select, the source that you want to show the cost share on. Then you have the non-sponsored section, which is only going to populate where this individual is being paid from or where they have been paid from for AY24. So if they were only paid from state funds, you're only going to see state funds. If you did a redistribution recently to a self-supporting fund and you want to use, and it's allowable, if the source is allowable, you want to use that fund, it may take up to 2 days to show, because ECC data is about a 2-day lag from Banner. So just keep that in mind if you are making recent redistributions. So that drop down, just both of those drop downs, keep in mind, it's going to be populated on where they are currently paid from as of a couple days prior in Banner. Then from there, once you select the non-sponsored cost share source, on the right-hand side in the highlighted areas, you're going to see the total available for cost share. So that's how much is currently charged to that funding source for this individual for AY24. And that is how much that you can cost share. So if you need to say this individual needed a cost share 30,000, they do not have enough funds here. So then you would probably have to split that across multiple cost share sources and make 2 entries, one for, one for one of the state funds and one for the other. So be mindful of that. That is reflective as of, like I said, 2-day-old Banner data where the person is currently paid from. So if you don't see a funding source that you think that person is paid from, then it is very possible that they are not paid from that source. And so you want to double check their pay information, their distribution. So from there, once you decide, say you only need to cost share $1,000 here, you would enter in on the left-hand side of that screenshot the cost share amount. You have enough available, put in 1,000, and you can make comments if you need to, for future purposes, if that's helpful at all. And then the next business day, or maybe 2 business days, depending on when this entry is made, the total cost share recorded should update. And so then say you come in here 2 days later and you don't recall, did my entry go through? How much do I have left? When you pull this individual up and you pull up those same funding sources, then you should see cost share recorded as 1,000. So you should see that you've already done it, and that you have, and then the remaining available will be reduced by $1,000. So that will update, but it will be a couple days lag. So that is your project statement entry. Once it is reflected in ECC, this is just a snippet of the project statement. It's going to show up in the cost share columns highlighted below. It's going to show the dollar amount and then the related percentage of their salary. So some cautions here. Be careful with labor redistributions affecting the cost share sources used and after entries have been made. So if you go in, you make entries, and then later on you do labor redistributions, now that person potentially does not have enough to cost share or meet that cost share obligation in that funding source, that's something you need to be mindful of. So if prior to certification, this can create an imbalance of variance, and it may not allow certification. If it occurs after certification, then a recertification will likely be required because we will be looking out for variances, which we will talk about that more at next week's mini session. But just keep an eye out for that. Be mindful of that if you are doing labor distributions, even though you think, oh, this isn't related to a sponsored fund. If it's affecting, if you are putting any sort of cost share on, for that person, using that cost share source, it can affect if that cost share that's already being reported. Be mindful of cost share remaining available. Just know that there is that 2-day lag. So if you're using, you know, that same cost share source, that non-sponsored source to meet multiple cost share obligations on different funds, different projects, there is a lag. So be mindful of that remaining balance. If you're making all those entries in one day, making sure that you're not exceeding the total available balance. And those are the main cautions I want to mention there for project statements. So I'll pause and see, let me go back and see if anybody has any questions on project statements. And I do want to note, we do have a video on how to do this, and this isn't necessarily meant to be a in-depth on how to enter, but it's more of a refresher, some sort of sticking points that we came across last year and just want to remind folks of. So I see we do have a question in the chat. So cost share entry for mandatory cost share only. Not necessarily. If you have mandatory cost share, yes, you should be reporting cost share. However, if you do have committed cost share, voluntary committed, meaning it's not required by the award, but we committed to it in, you know, budget justifications, programmatic reports, that type of thing. I would say the most common is if the individual is a key personnel and say they're going to commit 10%, maybe they reduced it to 8%. And so that's not quite, you know, depending on the sponsor's restrictions as far as reduction of effort, then, you know, you could report the 8%, but if it's only a situation of we could only charge 8% of their dollars of their salary because of funding and they wanted to move 2% off, but they still committed that 10% of effort, then in that case, you would want to report 2% cost share. So, so you could also be reporting cost share / salary cap, which is technically not cost share, and voluntary committed cost share. Hope that answers your question. I don't see any other questions in the chat. So I will move on to effort statement entries. So effort statement entries look different, a little bit different, because you can enter it directly onto the statement. So this is just a screenshot of what you are going to see. The highlighted areas are what you are going to enter. So the first two boxes with 0%, those are related to funds. You're going to enter whatever the cost share obligation is there. And then down in this lower section next to the little page icon, that is your non-sponsored section. You'll be entering a negative number to balance those entries out per cost share source. I have all that written out in the next page. And then you're also clicking on the page icon to distribute. So it is a little bit of a process to add cost share and effort statements. So adding cost share to the whole statement per fund is what we would recommend, just how the system currently operates now. I know that that's not necessarily how you all, or how we even think of cost share. You know, we want to enter the cost share committed for that particular fund, and then we figure out, you know, what are the cost share sources available. And sometimes we're lucky and we just have one cost share source and it makes it easy. But sometimes when we have to split the funding, the non-sponsored funding source, that's when it becomes a little bit more complicated. So just keep in mind, if you can differentiate, say for the state funds, okay, I'm going to do all the, you know, sponsored projects that are using state funds for cost share. I'm going to do all those entries first. If I have a gift fund that I'm going to use as another source of cost share to meet cost share obligations, then I would do all of those separately. That is our recommendation based on how the system works. Again, I know that's not necessarily how we think of it. we are working on trying to make that a little bit easier. So right now, you would want to enter the cost share in the funds. So next to the number 1, you're going to enter the cost share for each of the sponsored funds. You're going to enter, second, you're going to enter the negative cumulative amount for that cost sharing source. So we have funds 1 and 2. One is at 2%. Then we're going to cost share 1% on the second fund. In total, in the little grayed out area, we're going to have 3% total cost share. And so when we are reflecting that on the non-sponsored fund, we're going to enter a negative 3%. So the two balance, we are not done. So I highlighted step number 3 because we would get, emails and messages about, hey, I entered my cost share, it's not working, I can't submit. A lot of times it was because we didn't finish or the paper icon was not clicked to fully distribute the cost share, or if the cost share was changed, that it wasn't updated with the new numbers. So you may look at the statement itself and say everything balances, but I would urge you to double check and click on that paper icon to make sure that it matches your entries, that something is in there and that it matches your entries. So once you click on the paper icon, then it's going to bring you to this step number 4. So this is sort of like, oops, sorry, I didn't mean to do that. The top little section is kind of showing as you're going through the process, for that top fund, you're putting 2%. You see up in red font, it says this account has a cost share percentage equal to 1%. So 1% is left. So then down below the number 4, there's a little arrow showing that now it's at 0% in green, meaning we've distributed all the cost share. There's nothing remaining. So that's how it's going to look as you're making entries in for each of the sponsored funds that use that source, non-sponsored source for cost share. So make sure that it is all distributed. Make sure that it's green, and then you're going to submit. This is just a reminder of salary cap. So this is a page from the prior presentation, just indicating you are going to have faculty, or you could have faculty that are over a sponsor's cap. I went over that briefly on how to, check for that, looking at FTE, all of that. But some of the indicators, one of the indicators is looking at their statement and seeing this red question mark cap. That indicates that they're over the cap. So if you're hovering, you're going to get some calculations. I highlighted in the calculations, that's the important part, for cost share entry, quote unquote. That's what you will likely be entering in the cost share. So it's one of these two figures depending on depending on what the total effort to be certified is. So if this individual charged 7.02% in payroll, the system is automatically saying this person's over the flag. So if you are over the cap, and if you charge 7.02, that means automatically you need to show 3.02% as cost share, and total certified effort should be 10.04 based on their salary and based on the cap. If that's incorrect, then the system is saying the second computation is, well, if total certified effort should be 7.02, then you need to back off payroll so that only 4.91% of payroll is being charged and 2.11 is being shown as cost share. So those are some of the two common scenarios. And like, I'm not going to go in depth like we mentioned in the prior presentation, but there's this other calculator. If you click on the question mark red font cap, then you will get that the red the box underneath click, where it says click, and you'll be able to enter different certification amounts if what's currently either charged, well, basically, what if, depending on what's currently charged, if that is incorrect, then you can use some of the calculator, the flex calc on that page. So once you have those entries and you've made them, then as long as you've met the cost share obligation, then the cap is the font's going to turn green and you're going to have a green check mark. That means that you have met that obligation. I did mention in last week's presentation, there are some nuances to that depending on when the effort was worked and, you know, what cap was in effect at the time when the grant started and ended. So there is a possibility that these caps may not change even though you've entered the proper cost share. And in those cases, you'd want to put a comment or a note on the effort statement noting, you know, why it's showing as red. Well, it's showing as red because it's, you know, using the blended cap, but only the calendar year 2023 was applicable. No effort was worked in 2024. That might be an example of an explanation. So that's all I'm really going to say about salary cap cost share, but this is sort of where you're getting some of that information. You may be getting this information to enter in that quote unquote cost share for the individual over the cap. So let's see. So for effort statement corrections or removal, this is where it gets a bit tricky. I highly recommend if you're making any changes, you end up having to remove cost share, take screenshots. Take screenshots of the statement itself, take screenshots of this little window that pops up that's on this slide right here, because all the entries related to a particular cost shared source, that non-sponsored fund, will all clear out. You cannot just correct one fund. You have to remove all the entries. And just knowing how a lot of us work as far as cost share, that those cost shares entries could incorporate other sponsored funds or non-sponsored funds, excuse me, that, you know, in total they're meeting that cost share commitment. So I would just say it may affect a lot of your other entries. So I would say screenshot as much as possible when making changes, so that, or if you have a little spreadsheet that you're keeping track of or you're using to keep track, you know, make sure you have something as a backup because it will clear it out. So just note here that, you know, you must remove cost share for all funds per cost share source to change something. You cannot just change one line. So you're going to go back to that paper icon. This page will open up. You're going to click the remove button. I will say that it is a bit finicky. You may click remove, nothing happens. I will X out, and sometimes I'll go back in, click remove again, and then it'll clear out. You could also refresh your page, but I would just say go back to that page icon, make sure that everything is 0 to know that it's cleared out, because yeah, you just want to make sure that it's all cleared out here. So once all entries have been cleared, then you can go in and re-edit your page. On the face page, re-enter all the information for the funds, and, you know, your non-sponsored source, you're going to do your negative so that they both balance out, and you're just going to re-enter like you did before. So that is how you would remove, but that's just something to keep in mind. It is going to clear out all the data you have already entered. So it's very important to screenshot or have that information elsewhere. Otherwise, your heart may hurt after that. So just some cautions and some of the things I already mentioned before. Effort statements, be careful with labor redistributions affecting cost share sources after you've already, you know, made your entries. So similar to project statements, if you make labor distributions to the non-sponsored sources that you're using as cost share after you've already made entries and you thought things were balanced, it can create an imbalance. It's possible that the individual may be able to certify, and then later on, we're going to have to come back, reopen it, and have it recertified. It's also possible that the imbalance may prevent them from being able to certify. So that's something I would definitely check if you ever get contacted by a faculty member and they're saying, you know, I'm trying to certify, it's not working. If they have any sort of cost share on their statement, I tended to find that a lot of times it had something to do with cost share, why they couldn't certify. It may look okay on the page, but maybe that page icon where the distribution is supposed to be entered was not filled in, or maybe it didn't balance. That was often where the issue was at. So that's something I would recommend looking at. Like I said, if it gets certified and it's out of balance or then changes, we will have to likely reopen it and have it recertified. Remember to use remember to distribute the cost share using the page icon. Like I said, that ended up being a lot of the issues and why people couldn't submit and why things wouldn't balance and that type of thing. So make sure to distribute. And like I said, screenshot, screenshot, screenshot when you are making changes and you end up having to remove cost share. Or have your backup, but just have another source so that if that data gets cleared out, you have it elsewhere and you don't have to go back through some painful or lengthy calculations. And that is all that we had for today's mini session. Keep in mind, we do have recordings specifically for how to enter cost share for project statements and how to enter cost share for effort statements online. So it's a little bit more detailed and going through and actually showing you in the system. But this is just sort of a reminder and some of the pain points we ran into last year.